Alrighty, so match week 3 is upon us as once again we're gonna have full slate of action in MLS, and the schedule is kind of very similar to what we saw last match week, where we have the two matinee game that's gonna be happening on Saturday. Then we get the busy action that's gonna happen between 7:30 p.m. Eastern all the way up to midnight 30 a.m. Eastern time. Though there's only gonna be one late West Coast game that is going to happen, and coincidentally, that is actually the game that I'm going to this week. And then of course we got the two Sunday game. We also have the Sunday night soccer game between the Galaxy and St. Louis City that will happen at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. But nevertheless, I really like this schedule, and this is exactly what the fans been asking in previous year. We want to see more variety kickoff. We want to see more early games, and we've been very blessed the fact that there's been that, and I think that's going to continue as the season goes along. But we start off with the first matinee game on Saturday, which is the Columbus Crew versus the Houston Dynamo. So both of these teams kind of have opposite in terms of how they start the season, but in fairness, both of these teams wants to win this match, because for Columbus, after them just getting absolutely destroyed by LAFC in that game, I mean, this is going to be interesting to see whether or not if Wilfred Nancy even think about resting his team heading into that second leg game against LAFC, because I do feel like it's kind of all but lost in that second leg affair. I think that first leg game where they got absolutely smacked by LAFC, I don't see them coming back heading into the second leg. And I know Wilfred Nancy, he has pulled off some miracle but before, and he's gonna have to do it again in that second leg as well. But we'll see whether or not, if you maybe think that the CONCACAF Champions Cup run might be all but not over, and you just need to focus on league play, because they play against a Dynamo team that, yeah, they are definitely struggling in the early part of the season. It is pretty clear that this team missed a lot of their key players, and with the way that they didn't really try to replace too much of those player, I mean, yeah, that's kind of what you got in terms of a poor start to the season. No, now that being said, when you look at the first two games that they play, one they play against Dallas, which that game they should have won. That game they made some defensive mistake, and then of course the other game was against Inter Miami, and yeah, everyone's going to get absolutely railed by Inter Miami at time as well. So this should be a very interesting matchup, and again, both of these teams would definitely want to get a win. For Columbus, they want to get a win to try to take that sour note of what happened on Wednesday off their mouth against LAFC, and for the Dynamo, searching for their first win of the season on the road, which is something that they were very good last season, surprisingly. Now we move on to the next match, and of course we have a matchup that I think everybody has been very familiar with. I mean, anytime when Seattle versus LAFC is going to happen, you know that it has to be in a matinee kind of game, and that exactly what we got in this one. This could have easily been the Sunday night soccer game, in my opinion, and I'll talk about when we do get to that Sunday night soccer game, that a lot of people are not happy that the Galaxy in St. Louis is there, and there might be even talk that whether or not if MLS is going to have something similar to what we see with the NFL, maybe flex some of those important game out of the window for a much more intriguing game, because this is definitely an intriguing game between these two teams that what's kind of interesting about this matchup, unlike previous early season matchup between teams that were in the CONCACAF Champions Cup before, is that they face head to head with each other. So it's going to be an interesting approach to see what both teams is going to do, whether if they're going to start their starters. I think for LAFC, they're probably going to start most of their starters, considering the fact that they haven't really rest a lot of players, Steve Cherno, this season, but knowing that they maybe could get away with not really putting their strongest squad in the next game against Columbus, because they feel like they're comfortable enough that they build a big enough lead in the first leg that second leg is probably all but over. But for the Seattle Sounders, there's no doubt that we'll see whether or not Brian Schmitz might rest his guys, because he'll need all the manpower that he needs in that game against Cruz Azul down in Mexico. But this game starts at 4:45 p.m. Eastern, 1:45 p.m. Pacific. All-time meeting 13-4-6 in favor of LAFC. Seattle actually still is searching for their first win of the season, and in the last game when they did kind of punt it, the game against RSL, it did not go so well for them. And for LAFC, as much as they haven't really been playing that well in the league play, they've been kind of squeaking out 1-0 victory. It's been effective, and I think that last game against Columbus was probably the most impressive performance and most complete performance that we've seen, and that's kind of a performance that we can show that when LAFC does get things going, and once they get the midfield balance correct, then that's going to be the LAFC team that we're going to see, and that is a team that not a lot of team in the league, let alone the Western Conference, can stop whatsoever. Now, moving on, we got Atlanta United versus the New York Red Bulls. So this is the first of 5 games that starts at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Atlanta, of course, they are coming off of a loss against Charlotte FC and have a 1-0-1 record, whereas the Red Bulls won their first game of the season, and now they have a 1-0-1 record after winning against Nashville. All-time meeting 10-5-3 in favor of the Red Bulls. I remember this is a matchup that a couple of years ago is considered to be one of the hotly contested matchup because these two teams, as I've always mentioned, whenever Atlanta play against the Red Bulls, they are considered kind of rivals because they were at times a couple of years the best within the Eastern Conference. Obviously, that hasn't really quite materialized the last couple of years, but it's always fascinating matchup. Especially, this is going to be another game where Atlanta is going to run into a team that is very tough when it comes to breakdown. They had a lot of trouble in the last game against Charlotte against a really tough defensive team, and even their high power attack like Latte Laugh and Marinchuk and all those guys just couldn't really quite solve the might of that Charlotte defense, and they're gonna have to do it again here against a Red Bull side that definitely have been pretty good when it comes to facing against this Atlanta team. If you don't include what happened in the playoffs, in 2018 in the Eastern Conference Final. I mean, when you look at the record, the Red Bulls actually has at time pretty much owned Atlanta United throughout the head-to-head between both of these teams. And then we move on to the next one. We got FC Cincinnati versus Toronto FC. So FC Cincinnati again is the recipient of the free points this week. Again, I am so sorry, TFC fan, but this team is going to be a punching bag throughout the season. And for Cincinnati, knowing that this is another team that maybe might be resting some of their players as well, knowing that they got a big second leg heading into their next game as well against Tigres that is. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not if Pat Nolan is going to rest a lot of guys. I'm assuming he's going to, especially when you face against a TFC side that, yeah, it's been ugly in terms of what we've seen in the first 2 games under Robin Fraser, especially the last game as well. The last game was pretty ugly in the game against Orlando City, where that defense pretty much was non-existent whatsoever. So yeah, this might be an opportunity for Cincinnati to maybe rest their team and still will do good enough against this TFC side that yeah, this is the beginning of a rebuild. This is kind of what I anticipate was going to happen this season. I mean, Robin Fraser, as good as he was doing his time with the Colorado Rapids, he's going to take a lot in terms of trying to motivate this team, and unfortunately, it just kind of hasn't really quite worked out. So far, he hasn't really taken a bunch of these misfit to a good start, just like what we saw with John Herman last season. And then moving on, we got DC United versus Sporting KC. So should I say maybe this is kind of a desperation derby game? I mean, I know we're only 3 weeks in the season, and I shouldn't be saying desperation derby kind of game in a month with games, but you kind of had a sense that for both of these teams that are kind of getting off to a bit of a slow start. They're looking to try to get things going. I mean, for DC, they technically should be on one loss if it wasn't for Jacob Murrow with an incredible overhead kick to rescue them in that game against the Fire. And Sporting KC, I mean, what can you say about Sporting KC that hasn't been said? I mean, this has just been a disastrous start to the season for Peter and me's side, and now they're on verge of looking like what we saw in the past couple of years, where this team always gets off to a slow start, and there's no and once again dig themselves into a hole before the season even before we get into the middle part of the season. But all-time meeting 23-12 and 22 in favor of DC United. So relatively tight between these two teams that were original charter member of MLS that is. But yeah, again, there's no doubt that both of these teams want to get a win. So far DC, one thing about this start of the season, they've been getting some really easy opponents to start the season. I mean, the likes of Toronto, Chicago, and now facing against a Sporting KC side that you could argue is probably the worst team right now in the Western Conference. Those are some easy matchups, and if you cannot get a win out of those matchups, oh, there's got to be a lot of concern if you're a Troy Lesesne team, because the schedule is going to get much tougher, especially when they face those top tier Eastern Conference team, and if they can't get a win and get points on the board, I can't imagine they'll do so well for the rest of the season. Now, moving on, we got New England versus the Philadelphia Union. So, again, for New England, it's been kind of a start that, yeah, it's been a poor start to this season that I kind of expected because when you make so many changes, it's going to take a while to implement. And unfortunately, for Caleb Porter's side, as much as they want to get things going, now they face against probably the hottest team right now to start the season. And that, of course, is the Philadelphia Union. I mean, this team, for a team that so-called feels like they're going for a rebuild, they definitely doesn't look like a team going for a rebuild. It looks like with the way that the Union have started, it's kind of like a reminiscent of what we saw with St. Louis City that Bradley Carnell took over and then winning their first 5 games and really shocked everybody. It's kind of the same case again in this one. Now, I'm not quite sure if this is kind of sustainable of what the Union are doing. Probably it's not going to be sustainable. I mean, Ty Baribo is not going to score 5 goals into every single two games. His goal scoring talents might slow down eventually, but take nothing away from how hot the Union is right now. And against a New England side that is still trying to figure things out, this could be another one of those games where the Union could score a bunch of goals right now. I mean, it's hard to believe this team have already scored 8 goals to begin the season. Obviously, I know for a fact that they are not going to be on verge to potentially score 136 goals. That's their actually tally right now that they're going through, but I don't think it's gonna happen. I mean, that would be crazy if they score 100 plus goal. But it's been a great start for Bradley Carnell's side, and there's a chance they can do it again in this game against the New England side. That the seed is gonna get hotter and hotter for Caleb Porter if they can't figure this out. I mean, I know with a relatively new squad that they pretty much change over throughout the off season. It's going to take times to get things going, but consider how this is really the Caleb Porter side, and if there's no improvement that is being shown, again, do not be surprised. He might be the first coach to be fired this season. And then finally, the last game that finished off at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific. Well, the last game that kicks off at that time, and is going to finish off pretty much the same time as all of the 7:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff game is NYCFC versus Orlando City. So for NYCFC, it's been kind of an interesting start to their season. I will say that out of all the team that play in MLS to begin the season, NYCFC probably have one of the toughest start to the season when it comes to the opponent that they face. I mean, a daunting task to face against the Supporter Shield winner in Miami and almost pull off a stunning upset, and then they have to go on the road to play against the team that finished first in the West last year. So they had to play 2 teams that finished at the top of the standings last season to start the season. I mean, that's a brutal start to the season. But the good news is they are back at home and back in the friendly confines known as Yankee Stadium, and I think this might be the last year that they're gonna have their season home opener at Yankee Stadium because I think that stadium that they're building near City Field and near is probably going to be finished by next season. But there's no doubt that they're looking to trying to get their first win of the season and and get wins at home, which is something that they've been very good last season. And face against an Orlando City side that yes, they got a 4-2 win against Toronto FC. And it's a great bounce back after they themselves lost 4-2 in the opening weekend. But again, that was Toronto FC. That was projected to be one of the worst team in the league, if not the worst team in the league this season. Now they face against an NYCFC side that is not only going to be a much tougher opponent, but also, again, anytime when you're an opponent in a team and you have to play in the tight confine known as Yankee Stadium, it's always going to be tough to get points away. So we'll see how Oscar Pereira team will look coming into this game. Now we get into the later kickoffs. We have 3 games that start at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. There's actually going to be 2 that starts at 9:30 p.m. Eastern, and only one of them is a Mountain Time kickoff. As apparently Vancouver looks like they have a bit of an early start in their game this season. And I kind of see it with their schedule where they usually a lot of these West Coast team kick off at 7:30 p.m. Pacific, but Vancouver have a couple of games that actually start a little bit earlier as a result. But we start off with the first 8:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff, first of 3 of them. That is Austin FC and the Colorado Rapids. So for Austin, it's been kind of a mixed result in terms. So what we've seen a Nico Estevez team, it is pretty clear that this team does miss their number 10 in Sebastian Driussi, and they still haven't got their big Albanian signing into this roster as well. And once he does get into the roster, we'll see whether or not if he can create the productivity uh, that to give this team something and give Vasquez a service. Something tells me probably not, because when I look at the signings, and especially from what I heard about him, he's not really a guy that is more of a create the player, and a guy that provide the service to the other player to score. He's more of a goal scorer himself as well. They face against a Colorado Rapids side that, yeah, the first two games, it's been almost a complete contrast of style. The first game, a 0-0 draw against St. Louis, where they pretty much just kind of parked the bus in that game, and then the last game at home against Dallas, they play into a firework kind of type of game. So we'll see what kind of Chris Armas team is going to be in this game. Is it going to be just kind of a park the bus style play, or they're going to really open up and go for it against an Austin side that, again, this is definitely going to be a tough opponent that they will be facing. And again, after the last game that they lost against the Timbers, and them still kind of really struggling in terms of creating chances, do not be surprised if this could be a low scoring game if they can hold Colorado to check, just like what St. Louis did in the opening weekend against this Rapids team. By the way, all-time meeting 4-2 and 3 in favor of the Colorado Rapids. Now, in the second of the 8:30 p.m. Eastern start is FC Dallas versus the Chicago Fire. So for Dallas, they would play in an incredible free draw. And again, I think for FC Dallas, so far from what we've seen from them this season, it's pretty clear that this team is going to be a very entertaining team to watch. What Peter Quill has done to this team has started to be very similar to what we saw with the New Mexico United team last season. He plays this very entertaining brand of soccer where, while it's entertaining on the attacking end, that also means that it does leave a lot to be desired at the back. And as we've seen so far this season for Dallas, especially in the last game against the Rapids, yeah, as well as the attack is with Pedro Musa and Lucho Acosta combining, there will be question when it comes to their defensive shape. And that goes the same with the Chicago Fire as well. In fact, I would not be surprised if there's going to be a lot of goals scored in this. If there's going to be a crazy game this week, this is definitely going to be the one. I mean, both of these teams, it feels like they treat defense almost a second nature, at least in last week game. And in the case of the Chicago Fire, it seems like that's kind of the case with the way that they've already conceded 6 goals this season. They have a lot of good attacking power for Greg Berhalter's side. But all-time meeting 24, 6, and 20 in favor of FC Dallas. And again, I would not be surprised if there's going to be at least 4 goals that score in this game. And now watch how this is probably going to be a 0-0 draw, because that's how it works sometimes in MLS, where you predict it's going to be a high scoring affair and it kind of disappointed. Now, we move on to the last of the 8:30 p.m. Eastern start, and that, of course, is Nashville versus the Portland Timbers. And while I say this game is going to be a high-scoring affair, I couldn't be more opposite in terms of what we might see in this game. Do not be surprised that this could be a low-scoring game between two teams that obviously struggle on the attack so far. Nashville still trying to get the balance right with BJ Cowhen. Again, just like what we saw last season, this season it feels like this is a Nashville team that has been play more with possession, which is kind of what BJ Callahan wants his team to do. And against the Timber side, that again, they have had their fair struggle on the attacking it as well. Though it got better in the game against Austin. I mean, the game against Vancouver, that was, yeah, I'm pretty sure Timbers fans would not want to remember that game again. But all-time meeting 2-2 and 0 in favor of the Timbers. So the Timbers have never lost to Nashville SC, and they're going to trying to hope to keep that perfect record in this game as well. And then we move on into the 9:30 p.m. Eastern start, the first of two, and the first one is RSL versus San Diego FC. So RSL, they got a much needed win against the Seattle Sounders. I mean, to say that was a much needed win, it's an understatement, because this Real Salt Lake team has really struggled coming into that game against the Sounders, and it's a good thing that they face the Sounders, because they kind of own the Sounders whenever they play at the Riot. But now they get to face against the expansion team San Diego FC, and so far from what I've seen in the first two games of the season, it's kind of been what I expected with a very great Berhalter kind of team, where it's a team that can control the midfield, and it's a team that's going to have a lot of possession. But going forward, that's been a huge problem for the San Diego side, because besides the air there by the Galaxy on the defensive end that led to their first ever goal in club history, and then of course the counter-attacking moment late in the game, they have really struggled when it comes to going forward on the attacking end. And that game against St. Louis was a prime example of that. Now, part of that mainly due to the fact that Chucky Lozano did not play majority of the last game against St. Louis, and I don't know if he's going to be available in this game as well against RSL. But nevertheless, this should be a very interesting kind of matchup, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if San Diego is going to continue to play the style that they have. Again, I like the ideas of them playing this Greg Berhalter style of play, but they still need the players and still need the creativity, which again, that is going to be something that I wouldn't be surprised as we head closer into the summer transfer window, or even for the remaining part of the transfer window, that they might think about addressing, because it's pretty clear that this team has a good identity, and I think this team could be a team that could compete in the Western Conference. Heck, one of the big concern I have with the San Diego side is the fact that how is their defense going to hold up? Well, they only just in their first two games kept shut out and still have yet concede a goal in MLS play. So let's just say, yeah, their defense has definitely done well, and even their goalkeeper CJ Dos Santos. I mean, I know it's early, but he's giving me some Brad Stuver kind of vibe, a guy that was kind of an outcast for one of the team, being a second choice goalkeeper, getting a starting job with an expansion team, and has really thrived in the beginning. Now, moving on, we got the Vancouver Whitecaps versus Montreal. So this is a rare all Canadian matchup. You know, we usually don't see an all Canadian matchup unless we see a Canadian Classique or Vancouver play against Toronto FC. And in this all Canadian matchup, and you could also say a rematch of the Canadian Championship final as well, because both of these teams have met in the Canadian Championship final before. But both of these Canadian team has kind of had an interesting start. For Vancouver, it's been a very surprising start to the season under Jasper Sorensen, and really they play relatively well in the beginning of the season. Besides that one game that they lost against Saprissa where they gave up a goal late, I've been very impressed of how Jasper Sorensen has played, and that even includes the 1-1 draw that they had against Rayados, where they were by far the better team, and if they would have put away their chances, they probably would have won that game against Rayados. Now they play against a Montreal side that, you know, the first two games has been kind of a bit of a contrast. The first game they lost against Atlanta United, but I thought they looked really good in that game and was very unlucky to not get a point out of that game. And then the game against Minnesota, yeah, that is a game that Laurent Courtois would not want to hope as a repeat of this one, because that game was really bad against Minnesota. Now, granted, Minnesota is one of the better defensive team in the league, but the fact that they've only managed 3 shots in that entire game, yeah, that's going to be something that they have to change. And especially one of the issue with Montreal is the fact that just like last season, they're going to have to embark on this long road to start the season, and there's no doubt that Laurent Courtois knows it, and he's just hoping that this team can survive this long road trip at least with some respectability. One of the things that was good about last season is that when they had that long road trip to start the season, they were still able to be right up around the playoff line, and that's kind of what they needed, because they know they're going to have a lot of home games, especially during the summer time. And while last season at home they weren't as spectacular as I think they should be, they're gonna have to do so this season if they continue to get off to the poor of a start. Again, it's very unfortunate that they have to start on the road for so many games. Again, you know, them not committing to play at Olympic Stadium is kind of the reason why they have to start on the road for so many games. And it's the right choice, because let's be honest, no one should play at Olympic Stadium at Montreal. That stadium is an absolute dump and a half, and I'm pretty sure Montreal has no uh no incentive to even think about playing in that stadium, unless if they simply cannot do so. But nevertheless, this is going to be a tall task against a Whitecaps team that I wonder whether or not if Jasper Sorensen will rest some of his guys. Probably not, because they don't really have a lot of depth in this team, and with the way that injuries have already started to hit this team, we don't know what's going to be the health of Jaden Nelson after he got subbed off in the game against Rayados. I think they're probably going to once again roll out a pretty strong squad coming into this game. And then finally, the last game on Saturday is the game that I'm going to, which is the Bluesnod Derby between the Quakes and Minnesota. So anytime when there's a Bluesnod Derby, everyone always asks who do I really root for more, when both of my team that I root for face off against each other. And really, this is one of those one where I'm kind of like, I want to root for both in this game, and I know I shouldn't be doing that. But really, I'm very excited to see how both of my team have started the season. I mean, for the Quakes, it's been a breath of fresh air seeing how this team got off to a great start. And while I know maybe some of that might be a bit of a mirage, especially when you look at the team that they've been facing, are relatively teams that are easy, and especially coming off of CONCACAF play. And this is, I think, probably the biggest test for the Quakes in this early season for Bruce Arena, facing against a Minnesota side that has been rock solid on the defensive end. I do have question when it comes to the attack for Minnesota as well. They have struggled in that department, but the fact that this team have only conceded one goal throughout the season and only limited Montreal, a team that in the last game against Atlanta, where they play relatively well and limited to them to only have 3 shots. Yeah, this should be a very interesting kind of a game, and in some way, you could kind of say this is a game where it's the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. The unstoppable force is kind of the Quakes. The fact that they've already scored six goals to start the season as well, and probably could have scored more if they weren't down to 10 men in that game against Sporting KC, against an immovable object that is Minnesota. Only conceded one goal to begin the season as well, and their defense has looked absolutely solid, even when they face against LAFC as well. This should be an interesting matchup, and it could be a matchup where, again, I wouldn't be surprised that if the Quakes score, I'll definitely celebrate. But if Minnesota score, and especially where I'm going to be sitting near Quakes fans, I'm gonna just kind of quietly kind of applaud too, or even trying to quietly cheer inside, because again, it's one of those matchup where anytime when there's a Bluesnod derby, especially early in the season, it's kind of hard to for me to kind of really say that I really want to root for this team over my other team based on what their playoff position is, because in an early season belt like that, there's really not a lot of big kind of implication that could be when it comes to the playoffs, or maybe even ending a bad losing streak. I mean, this is something similar to season, where last season I was really rooting for Minnesota to beat the Quakes because the Quakes were way out of it. Minnesota was still chasing for playoff position, so I was really rooting hard for Minnesota to beat the Quakes whenever the Bluesnod derby happened. But here, I can't really do so, because again, both of these teams has done very well, and I would not be surprised. Can you imagine if both of these teams meet in the playoffs? It has not happened yet before. I think it only happened once in the knockout round in the MLS's back tournament, when Minnesota did meet the Quakes, and that was kind of an interesting interesting kind of game. And for those that think that it's kind of you would think it's enjoyable for me to watch both of my team play against each other in a high stake game. Actually, it isn't. It kind of at times stressed me out too, because there's times where I feel like one team probably could have had a better chance to move on and do well in the the next round, and then there's times where I might have that different feel. It's basically like conflicted feeling as well. But now moving on into the Sunday games, and we start off with the first Sunday game, and honestly, this should have been the Sunday night soccer game. I mean, if it wasn't for Seattle versus LAFC, this probably should have been the one, which is Inter Miami versus Charlotte FC, because I think while Inter Miami is definitely going to be facing some really good team in the Eastern Conference, that is going to be a marquee matchup. I think you can definitely bring Charlotte in that conversation, that they could be one of those teams that could really give Miami a bit of a run for their money, and especially with the way that it seems like maybe they're gonna have a full string team in this one. Especially, Messi hasn't played in the last couple of games. I'm assuming he's probably gonna be playing in this game against Charlotte. It'll be very interesting to see how this matchup is gonna be. Now, all-time meeting 3-2 in favor of Inter Miami, as this game starts at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. And just like I talked about, it's the unstoppable force versus the immovable object. That's kind of what this game is all about. The unstoppable force of Inter Miami when it comes to how good their attack is. Even when they're not clicking, eventually that this team is going to score goals, and they're facing against an immovable object, and we know how good Charlotte is when it comes to their defense. I mean, this is one of the best, if not could be the best defensive team once again this season under Dean Smith. So this should be a very interesting kind of matchup. I wonder, are we going to see a very similar kind of matchup that last time when both of these teams play against each other? Because what's interesting about this matchup is that this is exactly the same matchup that I went to watch Inter Miami play in person, and I was very impressed of how Charlotte not only withstand the pressure that Inter Miami has had, but they got a big resort and kind of sent a message to the rest of the league that, yeah, they can definitely hang with the big boys as well. And then finally, the last game, which is the Sunday night soccer game. And again, a lot of people want this game to be flexed out because both of these teams has not really looked so well. I mean, I think the original reason why they put this as a Sunday night soccer game, I mean, they probably saw what happened in the game last season at Dignity Health Sports Park. Didn't that game ended like 4-4? I mean, we know that whenever you watch a Galaxy game last season, you know it's going to be crazy. You know you're going to be entertained because it's not a Galaxy game if there's not a lot of shots and that happen in the game, a lot of chances by both team, or there could be a lot of goal scoring as well because that's kind of the style that the Galaxy played last season, and it was so successful to a point that they're the defending MLS Cup champion. Not so much this season though. I mean, this season it's been tough. At least if you're a Galaxy fan watching this team play, they've only scored one goal so far this season, and they look like a team that clearly is paying not only the cup tax with them really suffering from being in cap hell right now with them forcing to sell players because of limited cap space, but also the injuries that they've been battling in this early part of the season, and they're facing against a St. Louis side that, again, this St. Louis side in the first two games, it's been a very contrasted side. In the first game, it was very fun to watch, but they just couldn't score a goal. And then the last game, oh boy, that last game against San Diego. I mean, I know it was against a San Diego side that likes to keep possession, but the fact that they pretty much did nothing in that game against San Diego, like they only had what, two shots in that entire game against San Diego. That is a huge concern for Olaf Melbert's side in this early part of the season. Now, all-time meeting, 0-3-1 in favor of St. Louis. Of course, St. Louis won the only meeting last season when they were able to beat the Galaxy at home, and it was a very impressive victory as well, albeit that was a game that they did not have Ricky Puig. And speaking of which, that is a player that they clearly miss. I mean, him alongside with Joseph Payne, so those the two of the free killer P's not available in this one is definitely killing this team attack, but also just the midfield present as well. This new reshaped midfield just not only does not have the the chemistry to do so, but also it's not the same, and also the injury of Lucas Senabiria that also kind of hurt this team as well, losing quality in that. So yeah, again, I can understand why they make this a Sunday night soccer game in the beginning of the season, but at the same time, it kind of unfortunately hasn't really kind of play out to that because both of these teams has been really struggling when comes to the attacking end, and do not be surprised, if this game might be a little bit low scoring, and that everybody is going to once again vindicate the fact that, yeah, we should have a flex system in the Sunday night soccer situation, just like what we see in the NFL. Although I don't think it's going to happen relatively early. I mean, even in the NFL, they don't usually flex game very early in the season. They only flex it in the latter part of the season, and I wonder if MLS is going to do the same thing as well as the season goes along. There you have it. That is pretty much it for my preview of all 15 of these games for match week number 3. As always, let me know in the comments below what do you think of all of these games, and let me know in the comments below your prediction for all 15 of these games of this weekend's action of match week number 3. But until then, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.